Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Miriam and Shidduch Spot, soon to be hopefully a Simcha at Simcha Spot. Sorry. And thank you, Laura, so much for your inspiring words. I really very much enjoyed those words. Kind of got me into the right mode. So this is the end of a series of 3 of talks that we've been doing together, and I think this is probably the most challenging of the 3. And before I get started, I just want to kind of give a disclaimer. I approach this topic with extreme humility, sensitivity, empathy, and I really just want to, in advance, ask that if there's anything that I say that may rub someone the wrong way, this is a very sensitive topic that I just want to ask Mechila in advance, because I know that this can be very deeply painful and trigger a lot of areas of many different people's lives and relationships. So I just kind of say that as a disclaimer in advance. I also feel somewhat very connected to this topic, even though I myself am only married once, but my husband actually lost his first wife. And for those of you who don't know our whole story, I was single for many years. I'm just going to sum it up kind of quickly because I have mentioned this before. I was single for 14 years and dated hundreds of guys, thousands of dates, and my husband had been married for many years, and he never had children, and his wife was quite sick and she passed away. So as much as this is my first marriage, I feel deeply connected to kind of second marriages because I kind of experienced it through a lot of what my husband went through. So I kind of, by one degree of separation, kind of feel how that experience was for him. And I encourage feedback, and we're going to have a questions and answers at the end. So if anyone has anything that they'd like to contribute, I encourage you to do that at the end. Okay, so let's jump right in. So obviously, the 2 main topics that we're going to really focus on today is divorce, how to continue dating in a healthy way after divorce, and the loss of a loved one. And those really kind of bring up a lot of different feelings for a lot of different people. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of pain, whether or not it's pain of loss of dreams, or a loss of the relationship that you thought what could be, or a loss of someone that you actually had a good marriage with and really miss and are really, in tremendous pain over that loss. It's all loss. And one of the first things that I really encourage people to do when they're going through that is to really feel the loss deeply and to really mourn that loss, because without mourning it, it's very difficult to put it behind us and to move on from it. And a part of you will never leave that loss. If someone had a first love, a first relationship that was very successful, and through some tragedy they were ill or they passed away, obviously there's a pain there that will never quite go away. And no one's saying that it should, but at the same time, we would like you to also be able to move on. And in order to do that, I think it's so important to really, that first step is to really mourn it and to really feel it. And I've met people before that just wanted to move on, that didn't want to make a big deal about it. They didn't want people to make a fuss over them. And they paid the price later on when they were so triggered in so many other areas because they hadn't actually gone through the process of mourning, whether that means therapy or coaching or speaking to someone that can help you through it. It's really, really important to make sure that you feel the pain, you mourn the pain, and you let go of that pain in order to allow yourself to move forward. So that is, the first major part. There's also a lot of scars, especially after divorce, whether or not they're scars on the person themselves or on children. There are so many moving parts that go into relationships, and it's important to really, help everyone get the help that they need in order to mourn that process, because it will affect you, even if, let's say, you're moving on just fine, but your child isn't, and you want to introduce, a new man into the house. That's going to cause trouble. So being able to make sure that everyone in the home has kind of either come to peace or work through the pieces that are very difficult is really a key part of moving forward. Another part of mourning is that mourning of, well, if I lost somebody, will I ever find someone like them again? will I ever have a great marriage like I once did? Could anyone ever take their place, right? That extreme sense of loneliness, which could be so deep. And I think so many people felt that during the pandemic, how singles were alone for Shabbos, for Yontif, over and over, week after week, month after month. It was a very difficult time. And as much as so many people tried to help, there were so many gaps that were definitely not filled. And I know that, my heart definitely ached in those times. And I know what loneliness feels like. So I know how painful those times were for other people. But being able to, be there for somebody, if you can, even through a phone call. I know people that were dropping off, Shabbos food or Yontif food. They couldn't invite people over, but at least they were dropping off food to just show we care and I'm thinking of you. Part of that mourning, in addition to that, is in the divorce process, let's say, parts of myself that were lost, parts of myself that I buried, parts of myself that I neglected because I was trying to look out for the better good of the relationship, but parts of myself were lost, and I have to try to get those pieces back. I have to mourn what was lost, the time that was lost, the relationship that was lost, in order to move forward. And as I said before, therapy, coaching, whatever somebody feels that they need, is super, super important in order to be going into that new relationship on a clean slate and really ready to embrace what's up and coming. Just to define quickly the difference between therapy and coaching, because I get that question a lot. Therapy is really spending a lot of time kind of digging deeply into experiences and patterns of your past, whether or not it's your childhood or childhood relationships, or maybe a trauma, unfortunately, or something that we've gone through, really trying to understand it, get perspective in order to try to change that trajectory of how your future looks. And coaching is very different, especially, let's say, as a dating coach. I'm very focused on very specific practical goals and how to move somebody forward to their actual dating goals and marriage goals. Those are my actual, focus. Yes, I might dabble into, tell me a little bit about how you grew up, just in order to get perspective, but I'm not spending much time there. Both are very important. Both are very unique in their own way. I actually recommend that people go to therapy all the time. I'm not a therapist. I don't pretend to be a therapist. I do have a bachelor's in psychology, but I do know the tremendous value of therapy. And I encourage people to really kind of work through that stuff before you begin dating. It also, if those things don't get worked through, also affects a lot of triggers. So for instance, a guy will say something and you will think it sounds like something your ex might have said, although he didn't mean to say it that way. And he actually didn't say it that way, but that's how you heard it because you're so quote unquote triggered by something that he said, right? So just being able to work through that is really crucial, that mourning and working through it so that we're getting started on a fresh slate. Okay. So 3 dangers of dating before you're actually dealing with everything, okay? Number 1, this is something that I bump up against a lot: perfectionism. So for a lot of people, this is not so much someone who's gone through loss, but in divorce, someone who has gone through a traumatic relationship. They thought it would be this fantasy relationship. It was not. And they mourned that loss. But now moving forward, and they're ready to move forward. Now moving forward, they are approaching dating with this very perfectionist view, because either I waited so long, therefore I deserve. My first marriage wasn't what I had expected, therefore I'm going to do it perfectly this time. And obviously there's truth in that. We want to redo this in a healthy way, in a positive way, but we also want to make sure that perfectionism doesn't stand in the way of us actually moving forward. Because I have dealt with a lot of clients who are so perfectionistic, they won't even let anybody come through. They won't even let a man or a woman come through because they're so busy trying to find the flaw and why this shouldn't work. Some of them has to do with the fears that they haven't completely worked through yet. But the important thing is that even though this person might not be perfect, that doesn't mean that we can't build a beautiful life with them. That doesn't mean that we can't enjoy their company. That doesn't mean that we can't be compatible, right? I can be imperfect and he can be imperfect, and we could be perfectly imperfect together happily, and work an entire lifetime. That's what marriage is, on working together and bridging those gaps and softening those rough edges and building a life together and working through challenges together. That's the beauty of marriage. But I find that to be a real danger that people tend to fall into. I'll also say that perfectionism had, and actually I give a story about this. I had a client who, he came from a divorced home, and every girl he went out with was not something enough. She wasn't smart enough, from enough, funny enough, pretty enough. He always had a reason. And he was so fearful of marriage that perfectionism was like his closest friend, because if he could hold on to perfectionism, if he could just find something that was wrong with her, then he didn't have to deal with the fear of, oh my gosh, what if my marriage looks like my parents? That would be a disaster. What if I had to marry a girl and find out that she had flaws that remind me of, my parents' relationship? Oh my gosh, that's it. I can't go there. So he became so attached to this perfectionism, and he would nix girls all the time. And the sad thing is, he really wanted to be married, but he didn't actually see himself. And when I brought it up, he was really, really upset at me. When I brought up that point, it took a little time to bring it up, but once I actually did, he was really upset. I don't want to speak to you ever again. Please, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, that's fine. I respect if that's what you'd like. I respect it. 6 months later, he called me back and he said, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm ready to start working on it. And I really want to get married now. And that's when he was really able to start doing the work of working through that fear and anxiety, of dealing with all of that pain that he hadn't properly dealt with, and open up the gates to allow that right person to come through. Another danger is people that are worried that no one's gonna really want me. No one's gonna want my kids. No one's gonna want the fact that I had an ex. No one's gonna want the fact that I don't look as young as I always did. Maybe I don't have a fancy job. Maybe I don't have a fancy portfolio. And who's gonna even want me? I guess I'll just take whoever comes to my door. And unfortunately, I've heard this too many times, where mentors, rabbanim, shadchanim, whatever it is, will say, you just need to marry him. Who do you think is going to take you? You think anyone's going to take your 4 kids? You think anyone's going to take the fact that you're overweight? You think anyone's going to take the fact that you have a mental illness, right? And so that's it. This is the best it gets. Just take him and run. And they do. And they do. And it often does not work out very well. And here's the thing. We're not looking for perfection to marry perfection, but 2 people should feel compatible and want the package of the other person. There should be a wanting of, I want what this other person has to offer. And something that I say very often is, you get the love that you think you deserve. I don't necessarily blame the shadchan or the rav who said that. They probably meant well. But if we don't believe that we actually deserve someone who treats us with respect, with dignity, that makes us feel cherished and loved and cared for, and that we are worthy of a high level love, then we won't be getting it. And that's something that I really try to encourage with people, that if you don't believe that you deserve a really great guy or a really great girl, they can't convince you of that. The only person who needs to believe that is you, not the coach, not the shadchan, right? I always tell people, I can't want you to marry a high quality person better than you do. If you don't want it for yourself, I can't want it more than you, right? So a lot of that self-esteem work is going to be so crucial for us to believe that even though we have a package, and yes, we're not 19 and maybe our lives didn't just start with a clean slate, that's okay. There are parts of me that are unbelievable. I am intelligent, I'm capable, I'm kind, I'm connected to my Yiddishkeit, I'm a community person, I'm a chesed person, whatever great qualities that you have, you deserve to be cherished and loved for those qualities, and nobody should be telling you else. And obviously we need to be, like I say, appropriate. So when we're looking into options, yes, we have to be appropriate as to, this is our package. We might have to also take someone who has a bit of a package. That doesn't mean that I can't want his package and we can't work it out together and really be happy. But we do have to believe in ourselves that we're capable. And what I find that a lot of second-time marriages people are doing is they're settling because I just need to be married. I just need to be married. I can't be alone. It's too scary for me to be alone. And here's the thing. I tell people, it's good for you to be alone. It's good for you to be alone a little bit up until that point that you realize, I am okay. I am good enough. I am safe. I am happy with who I am on my own. When you reach that point that you are happy with who you are on your own, that is an indication that now you are ready to share your life with somebody else. When my happiness is only dependent on if somebody loves me, if somebody's there for me, I can't be alone. What am I going to do if someone's not here? That's not really self-confidence. That's not really feeling that I am worthy of being loved and appreciated. And this is something that I personally struggle with clients, because I've had a variety of clients who didn't want to take my word for it and decided, I need to date, but I need to date. And they didn't really mourn through it, and they didn't really get the help they needed. And they just couldn't be alone, absolutely couldn't be alone. And they are in marriages today that I will say are tremendous struggle. And part of that is they never allow themselves to become whole. And becoming whole and healthy is really, really huge. Okay. Part of, just to go back on our perfectionism, part of that perfectionism is also to be able to show society, right? Maybe I failed once, but if I marry perfect now, everybody will look at me as like a success, right? So the perfectionism is going to cure my failure. If I could just be looked at as, wow, look what she got this time, look what she did this time, which, by the way, as much as you think people really care that much, maybe they talk a little bit here and there for a couple of days, it's over. People don't really think about it more than 5 minutes. They really don't care that much. They've got so many other things going on, right? At the end of the day, you're going to be the one who's going to have to be living with that person. So we want to make sure that this decision is solid. Okay. So the saying goes, you know, wait a month for every year that you are married. That's kind of the typical time frame. People will say, like, how long to wait before you start dating. Every person is different, and every person needs to know for themselves when they feel like they have healed from that level of loss to move on. It could be in a divorce. Many people are mentally divorced before they're actually physically divorced. And some people are, you know, have lost a loved one and are still married to them mentally, even though they've been gone for many years. And everybody has to know what they are up to. But it is important to make sure that if you are attempting to go on a date, these are some things that shouldn't happen, okay? I'm on a date and all I think about is stories about my ex, all this trauma. He said this, he did that. And you can't imagine what he did to the kids. And the entire date basically turns into you dumping your entire ex story on your date. This is an indication you are not ready to start dating. A, because negativity is not attractive. I've said this before. B, because it's way too much, way too fast. And C, if that's all you're really thinking about, then you're not allowing someone to actually get to know who you are. And that is a loss for you, and that is a loss for him, right? The goal is that he wants to get to know you because he'd like to see if there's any potential to build a relationship here. But he can't get to know you if all he gets is this kind of spewed negativity. And actually, some of that negativity is kind of a boundary of me being able to protect myself. So if I could just talk about all these external stories that he did this and this ex did that, then I don't have to actually let you in to get to know me, because that's where I'm really kind of protecting my heart. And I completely respect that and understand that. We could talk about so many other topics, you know, politics, you know, community. I mean, talk about COVID for all you want, but don't sit there and go bashing your ex. It's very, very unattractive. People do not appreciate it. It's way too much too fast, and it usually scares people away. So when they come back from a date and say, I don't know, I thought I had such a good date, and he said no, and I can't figure out why, and we go through the conversation, well, we quickly figure out what happened on the date that got somebody pretty turned off. Okay, if you find yourself taking a break when you're going on a date to go to the bathroom to start crying because you miss your first spouse and you just can't believe that you have to move on, that might also be an indication that you're not particularly ready. Now, there are two schools of thought, you know, kind of wait until you're ready when we're not sure exactly when that'll be, or kind of throw yourself in. So I kind of find myself in the middle ground of like, give yourself some adequate time till you feel this kind of wanting of moving forward. And even though that'll happen, you still might find yourself a little emotional after a date, wanting to share things that might not necessarily be appropriate at this stage of the dating. But at least we're trying to move you forward, because some people will spend years and years and years waiting for that right time, and that right time will never come. And we kind of have to like take a step and take a stance and make that happen in order for someone to really be able to move forward. Okay. So just kind of reorienting our steps of moving forward, right? So the first step is really kind of letting go. We have to like let go of that past. And it's so difficult. That mourning process is part of letting go of that past. And very often we're trying to move forward while we've got still one foot in the past, and we just can't figure out why we can't move forward because we're still holding on so tightly to that past. Maybe we're wondering why the guy we're dating or the girl we're dating is not exactly like the previous spouse that we had, or maybe they're not exactly like the previous ex-spouse that we have, because now all of a sudden we're only remembering all the good about them and we're not focused on the reasons why the relationship didn't succeed, right? And so very often we've got this one foot holding on to the past that does nothing for us, because we're not moving into the past, we're moving only into the future. or we're staying stuck in the present, but we're definitely not going to the past, right? So being able to kind of like let go. And I'm just going to tell a story of my husband, who is actually quite good at this, if he doesn't mind. He said to me on a date, he said, I'm a married kind of guy. I'm married. I was like, oh boy, that's a problem because we're on a date. What's going on here? He's like, I'm a married kind of guy. I don't know who I'm married to yet, but I am a married kind of person. I just have to find the right person to whom I will marry. But I am a married kind of guy. And to me, that was so attractive because he had let go of the past. He had completely embraced the future. He knew he was moving forward. In his mind, he was married to the next person. He just needed to find who that next person was. And to me, that was a strong indication of, wow, he's really ready. And so when you find indications like that, it's really helpful to be able to see that readiness, because it shows me, well, if I invest in this relationship, it won't be for nothing. He's not going to completely walk out the door or flake on me. If I invest in this relationship, this is a relationship that can actually go somewhere. This is a relationship that I should really be investing in. And so that's a really good kind of indication to be looking for. Second step is learning, right? So I let go. I've successfully let go, and I'm ready to embrace that next step. Next is learning. Okay, what did I learn from my past relationships? What did I learn that I want to now do differently in these relationships? Even in happy marriages, there might have been some tension in a certain area that didn't work for you. Maybe it was finances were always a struggle, or maybe it was you always disagreed about maybe some area of hashkafa, and you feel like, I maybe really want someone a little bit firmer this time around, or I really want somebody who understands me more deeply emotionally, because my first husband, even though he was so wonderful, he didn't quite understand that, right? So learning what it was that didn't work from previous relationships in order to now figure out how we should move forward. What do I definitely want to repeat? Those are also important, right? So even though there might have been a divorce, there might have been some really wonderful qualities about that person. What can I try to incorporate? What were the core qualities that I had found in that person that actually were successful? Yes, the relationship didn't work out, but what were those qualities so that I know I can now move forward and take those qualities, because those really worked for me, right? And you've heard me say before that I really encourage people to put together that list of what do I need versus what do I want. It's a very different kind of list. You cannot live without your needs being fully met. You can live without some wants being met. And to be able to sit down and take what you've learned from the things you want to repeat and the things that you don't want to repeat, put that list together to come up with an appropriate, I didn't say extreme or perfectionist, but to come up with an appropriate list of things that would really work for you because you've seen them work before or you've seen them not work before. And being married previously actually gives you that edge because you actually have that experience, where singles don't have that experience. They're kind of figuring it out as they go along. So being able to have that experience is very helpful when you're moving forward. The next thing is reality versus fantasy, right? So very often that fantasy is so important because the fantasy gives us that hope, as I've talked about in the past. The fantasy gives us that hope of maybe he's out there, maybe she's out there, I'm going to find her, I'm going to find him. You know, it gets me up in the morning. You never know. Maybe today a shotgun's going to call me and set me up with this wonderful person. It keeps us going. But at the same time, we have to balance it with, realistic goals and expectations, because if we don't, then we can fall into that perfectionist fantasy mode. And, no one ever calls me and says, hi, I'm looking for a great guy. And if he has health issues and if he's not so kind and, if he beats his wife, like that's okay. No one ever calls me and asks for that, right? They only say all the positive qualities. So we want to make sure that we're getting a realistic, balanced view of the things that the fantasy that I'm dreaming of, that's moving me forward, that's perpetuating me to go out and seek and move on, but also balance that with the reality of the package that I bring, who I actually am, and what I can actually expect to find. And that third stage is letting in, right? So letting go, learning who I am and what I need, and letting in, being able to allow myself to open up. And I think that that's one of the hardest stages for a lot of people. You've already let someone in, you've already loved someone, and either you've gotten very hurt or you've lost someone, which also is tremendous pain. So how do I open up again and let someone into my heart when I've already been hurt so many times? And the thing that I often say is, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is to be alone and to live with that pain on your own. And even if you marry someone who will not be like your ex and who will not be like your first husband, because there are no two people who are exactly the same, you will be able to share a life with somebody. You'll be able to have that that compatibility, that companionship that you deserve and you should have, right? And second time around marriages are much simpler in many areas. So for instance, past a certain age, many people are not worried about, oh, how old she is, are we going to have kids? No, I'm not having kids. I just want a companion. I have my children, he has his children, we have grandchildren, and I'm financially stable, I'm happy with who I am. I've had a great life, but we both lost our spouses and we're looking for somebody to share the rest of our lives with, right? And so that could be, in a sense, simpler than many singles who are A, trying to figure out the whole relationship thing, B, also heading into being parents, which is very exciting and beautiful, but it's also a large topic to navigate when you're young. And should I go out with her? Well, she's 35. Can she still have children? Like, these are questions that I get a lot. So in many areas, second marriages can be simpler if we allow them to. Okay, so as we're letting somebody in, one of the big messages that's really, really difficult is, can I let go of that past in order to embrace the future that's in front of me? And that future won't be the same as it was in the past. And maybe that's good news. And maybe that's hard to accept. But we can't embrace that future journey and adventure that we might have with somebody new until we let go of the past, until we learn from those experiences, until we allow somebody into our new lives. Okay. And, over the time that, you've been single or married or divorced, you've grown, you've changed, you've evolved. So when we're trying to introduce you to somebody, I always wonder why someone will put together a resume and it'll be the same qualities and things that they had said when they were 20. You're not the same person when you were 20. Now you're 45. How could you have the same requirements on the resume? Yes, the core human being needs to be a kind-hearted, menschlich, giving person, but you've changed, you've evolved, and so should what you're looking for, because you're more experienced in relationships, you've had more life wisdom. So use that to your benefit, because that could actually really help you in relationships. And as we said before, allowing for that different picture. Well, my first husband came from this kind of family, and hashkafically he was like that, and we davened in this kind of shul, and he was this tall, and he made this kind of money. That's true, but that was the first husband. And it could be a very different picture, and it could be a beautiful picture that's different, and that's okay. But until we're able to embrace and open up to the idea of embracing something new and different, it's going to be very hard for us to move on. Because if we're looking for a carbon copy of someone that we had experienced in the past, it's going to be very challenging to find, and we might bump up against a lot of frustration. Okay, and giving yourself that permission to love again, whether or not I feel like I could be hurt because I was hurt in my first marriage, or whether or not I feel like I gave my heart to someone and then I lost them and I feel crushed. I remember dating somebody and he's a wonderful guy, and I wasn't particularly sure that he was for me, but he wouldn't open up. And finally, I had to break up with him because it just wasn't really going anywhere. And I said to him, I really think that you should speak to someone about this, because there's something really in the way. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's me, but there's something really in the way. Years later, he sent me a wedding invitation of his own wedding to somebody else. And he wrote me a note saying that I should please call him. And I called him, and he thanked me profusely, because he ended up going to therapy. And in therapy, what he discovered is that because he had lost his mother at the age of about 19, which was like the crucial age of, he wasn't dating, but he was about to start dating within his 20s. He developed this trauma that if I love somebody so much and I can lose them, then I would rather not love them. And so he was dating, and he was already at this point in his late 20s, early 30s, and he couldn't allow himself to open up to someone and connect to somebody deeply because he was so scared of losing them. And once he was able to mourn the loss of his mother properly and be able to realize this piece of, I'm scared to love again because what if I lose them? Once he worked through that, he got married right away. And so these pieces are so crucial, because often just the floodgates open when we're able to work through those pieces that are really, really holding us back. And of course, this talk is limited, so there's only so much that I can cover in the scope of our time together. It's a very broad topic, and we'll open up for questions, but there is so much to say on this topic, and it's obviously a very sensitive topic, and there are no perfectly simple answers, but we're trying our best here. Okay. So practical steps. What are the practical steps? Okay, so as we talked about, we're going to establish a list of needs and wants. That means if someone's trying to suggest a guide to you that is, let's say, hashkafically completely inappropriate, right? We're not going to go out with them because we're not going to waste their time and we're not going to waste our time. If Torah learning and following halacha is something that is important to you and that is completely not something that's important to them, maybe you'll hit it off and maybe you'll have great chemistry. But bumping up against those goals and values that are not going to be within basic alignment, within the ballpark of each other, is definitely going to cause long-term harm. So make sure that when you write down those needs and wants, that you focus on what I really need, what I really cannot live without. So when somebody suggests something to you, that you're able to look at that list, it's just a list for you, and be able to compare and say like, does this actually meet my basic criteria? Okay. I don't recommend the list to be extremely long, but just some basics so that we have like a sense to go by. Okay, and obviously, like we talked about, research your dates, right? So a lot of times people will call me and they'll say, I went out with this guy and he said this dumb thing and he was so crazy. Did you look into him? Did you ask questions about him? I have an article on my website that talks about dating checking and all the things to check and how to listen when somebody's talking and how to ask for examples when somebody says, oh, he's such a Baal Chesed. Oh, really? What do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more. Give me an example, right? So being able to get to know somebody a little bit more than just face value what people are saying about them is really, really important. Again, quality over quantity, right? So I know that a lot of times getting dates is very challenging for a lot of people, maybe for women more than men. It's not really about the quantity. It's really about the quality. I tell a story when I dated my 40th guy, which sounds like a lot, but since I married number 220 over here, 40 at the time seemed like a lot, but wasn't quite a lot. So I had a friend who her parents were very strict about checking every guy out until it looked completely perfect. And she was upset. She said, I go out with one guy a year because my parents won't allow me to not allow me, but no one gets through the floodgates, no one gets through those pearly gates, like one guy a year, that's all I get. So if I don't make this work, that's it, right? But she married a really great guy that year. And I was up to number 40 and look how far I went, right? So who cares about how many people she's like, you always have dates. Who cares? Who cares how many? It's not about how many. It's about the quality of dates that you're getting and that the people make some level of sense for who you are and what you're looking for so that we don't feel like we're wasting our time or somebody else's time. I recommend people familiarize themselves with the dating trends and the dating protocols. So if you got married in your young 20s and now you're widowed in your 60s, that means that things have changed, right? So you've got to familiarize yourself with what's changed. There's been a resume, right? You need to understand what a resume is. There's something called Zoom dating. You have to understand what that is, singles events, Shabbos meals, right? So you have to get familiar with what that is. And you might decide that some of those avenues are not right for you, and that could be possibly true. But you still want to familiarize yourself with what is going on and make sure that what you're looking for is updated. We're not the same people that we were when we were 20. Hopefully we've evolved. Like a woman said to me, she was at a wedding and somebody said, oh my goodness, you haven't changed in 50 years. And she said, oh, that's terrible. What do you mean I haven't changed in 50 years? I've been working on myself every day. I should hope that I've been changing, right? So she meant it as a compliment, like you look beautiful, like you did when you were 20. But hopefully we should all be changing and evolving with every day of our life so that when we are in our 60s, we've amassed a lot of wisdom and experience, and we should be able to bring that into our relationships. And even though we might not look like we're in our 20s, it doesn't matter. You're bringing a whole different being into a relationship. You're bringing those years of experience with you. So, don't take that for granted. It's not something that young singles have, and they wish they did. So take that and put that in your back pocket. Okay. Optimism. Okay. So the vibe that we put out, the energy that we put out is kind of the vibe that we're going to attract. So if we go out with this negative heaviness to our dating, those are probably the kinds of guys that we're going to attract, right? And that's kind of the conversation that we're going to have because we seem to be wanting that kind of guy. And vice versa, if we go out with this positive, optimistic attitude, that's going to be something that we're going to be attracting as well. And as much as it's difficult, I don't mean to minimize the pain and the loss and how difficult it is to sometimes get up in the morning and put on a smile. I don't mean to minimize that at all. I do think, though, that there is a time and a place to share that with somebody. As I've said in the past, once there's a foundation that's built where the relationship can carry the energy of two people, and I want to be here, and I respect you, and I accept you, and I'm not judging you, right? Once that's been established, then I can put things that are a little bit heavier on a foundation that can actually hold it. And I can share an uncomfortable story or a difficult thing that my ex said or a bad experience that I went through. And the relationship can hold that. Until that point, we're just building the foundation, and we can't pour things, on a foundation that's just going to like slide through like quicksand. We have to have that foundation of a relationship first before we do that. Don't be scared to try something new, right? Don't be scared to try Zoom dating, even though you think like, oh my goodness, no one my age does this. That's not true. It's not true. You'd be very, very surprised to see how many people take to it very, very well. Don't be scared to try something new. Go out with somebody that's maybe slightly out of your comfort zone. Not that it doesn't match up with your needs list, but that it's slightly out of what you would typically think you would see yourself with, right? Because in that space, we're allowing ourselves to stretch. That's our stretch zone, that we're allowing ourselves to expand our horizons. And, Hashem can only do his thing if you do your part. So when you expand those horizons, you kind of allow for that to happen. And that's super important. Okay. All right. Now, in closing, I don't need to say this. This is anyone who's been married should know this. The best marriages take work, and they take a lot of work, a lot of hard work. What's the point if all these marriages take so much work? I had a friend who broke up with a guy, and this is the way the guy broke up with her. He said, you're a wonderful person, and I can build a great life with you. I know I can. And I know it's also going to take a lot of work, and I just don't have the energy. I don't have the patience. And I just want it to be easy. And he broke up with her. And she was so thankful he broke up with her, because if you think that marriage is so easy and you're just going to throw it out before it hasn't even started, then I don't want to be with a guy like that, right? But work doesn't have to be bad. Hard work doesn't have to be bad. Anything in our life that we've ever put hard work into, we've yielded amazing things from, right? Who doesn't put hard work into their children? Who doesn't put hard work into their careers? Who doesn't put hard work into making a beautiful Yantiv Shabbos meal, right? We all put hard work into it. The hard work is not bad. Hopefully that work yields connection, yields a relationship, yields a couple that are deeply committed and in love and together and respectful and growing together. That's what the work is meant to do. But if we're going into relationships to think that we're going to cure our previous trauma because that was bad and this is going to be easy, that was hard work and this is going to be, simple, that's going to be really dangerous, because that's not how relationships work. We all have to put in the hard work. Hopefully, when we put in the hard work, we're working with another partner who is healthy, who is optimistic, who is wanting to work together with us, and together we can build. Trying to put in hard work in a relationship where only one side is working and the other side isn't working is much more difficult than when we're working together as a team. And hopefully, we're looking for that team player who wants to work together with you. So, okay, just to close up here. So this is just, a public service announcement. For some reason, and I'm not quite sure why, it seems to be that there is a lack of shadchanim, or a lack of focus on setting up our second timers as much as our first time daters. Whether or not it's because they're widowed or because they're divorced, or maybe, they're just much older than we're not sure what to do with, they still want to be married. And we really have to work on trying to help each other. So if you go out with somebody, even if you're not a shadchan, and you go out with this wonderful man and you think that he's not appropriate for you, but you think he might be for your neighbor, call her up, set her up. We're really lacking a sufficient amount of shadchanim that are focused on second time marriages, and specifically like the 50 plus age. I find that to be a really, really hard place. And most of them have been married previously. Many of them are widowed, and they're wonderful people, have so much energy left in them and so much life. And like I said, many times they're less complicated because they're not looking to have children. They're not looking for someone to pay their bills. They really just want companionship. So try to pitch in and help each other. I think it's so crucial. I hope that Shidduch Spot will maybe create like a little tab or a little link or something where we can really help focus on our 50, 60 plus crowd who really want to be with somebody, really want that companionship, because I think it's so, so important.
Rachel, we do actually have one who's actually in Baltimore right now, and she is on our site. I don't know if we can do something specific, separate, but Sherry Zaslow is a shadchan that specializes the second time round, and she's in Baltimore, but she's on our website. So
Good to know. Okay, so thank you for telling me that. That's excellent. I'm really happy to hear that. Okay, excellent. And the second thing that I really want to say is second timers have something going for you because you've already made that commitment. You're not scared of commitment like you first were that first time. And I think that works to your benefit. So even though what you're bringing to the table of a relationship is different than maybe what you brought when you were much younger, different doesn't mean bad. Different could be better in a different kind of way. You've raised children, you are commitment minded, you have so many years of wisdom, either from your job or from relationships or from home life. So you bring so much to the table, and we're gonna get the love that we think we deserve. And if we think we deserve a wonderful woman and a wonderful guy, that is what we're gonna get. And unfortunately, if we don't think we deserve, if we don't think anybody wants us, if we don't think we're lovable and worthy of a good relationship, unfortunately, that's what we tend to attract. So I'm here to really just try to encourage everybody, give everybody a bracha that this journey should be as fast and painless as possible, and that you should be able to believe in yourself that he or she is out there and you can find them. Will it always be simple? No, it will not be simple. But I do believe that if you really keep at it and you really try and you're being flexible and appropriate and mindful of where you're wanted. I've talked about this before. We're going where we're wanted as opposed to forcing ourselves on dates that might not want what we have to offer, but really focusing on the kind of people that would want what we have to offer. I do believe that we can have some really beautiful, successful marriages here. So I'd like to open the floor for questions. If there are any, please let me know.
Alrighty, thanks as always, Rachel. You hit it out of the park again, as you do so often. Dinner tonight was amazing. But beyond that, I do want to just thank you personally that you were willing to accept imperfection. Otherwise, no chance it would have happened. And to dive into this remix together with me. Let's get to the questions. There have been some really interesting questions that have come in, and there have been certain themes that have emerged. So I'm going to bring some of those ones that seem to be thematic up first. The first question is, I've kind of gotten used to being alone. It can be hard for me to prioritize dating when there are so many distractions of work and family. So, it seems that there's a part of me that wants to be dating, that wants to try again, but like, it's been a while, and now I'm just doing my thing. I don't want to be stuck where it's too late, but at the same time, how do I get myself excited?
Okay, so here's the first thing. Is my mute on? Okay. It's off. So you don't have to get remarried. You don't. Nobody's saying that you have to, right? And we kind of get used to the life that we're given. I was single for 14 years. I was very happy. I knew I wanted to get married, but ask my husband. I was traveling the world. I was having a wonderful time. I was really very happy. I happened to have been, I realized I wasn't married and I should have a family and all that. It would be a good thing. But in the meantime, I was having a really great time, and I was so distracted and so busy that I often didn't even think about it much. And I would go on my dates. I had a lot of routine dates, but then sometimes there are these moments that hit you, like those Yom Tovim when you're alone, lighting Hanukkah candles by yourself, day after day, month after month, year after year. Pesach, when you're doing all the cooking and the cleaning and your siblings are coming home with all their kids, like it hits you. Wait a minute, I'm actually missing something really crucial. And so as much as we can get comfortable being alone, and there's no one to say that you have to get married. If that really is a goal for you, it's only going to get more difficult to connect your life with somebody else's if you wait longer and longer, right? It's always easier to do that when we are younger, more flexible. And the other reason why you're appreciating your loneliness is because you haven't actually tasted a really wonderful relationship. Because if you did, you would never want to be lonely. But it's because you haven't, or because you haven't had it in a long time, that you think it's not possible. Therefore, I'll just settle for being alone. And if loneliness makes you happy, it's not for me to say that you shouldn't be. But I just know from so many clients that I've worked with, and for myself, that as happy as I thought I was when I was single, I'm that much happier married. And I just didn't even know the possibilities that were out there until they came up. So I want that at the very least, you should know what you're giving up. Because if you have an idea of wanting that, you should go for it sooner than later. It only gets more difficult.
Okay, got it. This is I think similar to the first question, but this is sort of emphatic. If you were in a bad marriage and then had a traumatic divorce. This seems to be a specific situation in which the get was withheld. It's now, the get was withheld for many years. It's now been many years since the divorce actually came through. And it's just terrifying to think about getting back in. So it's not just, I'm out and life is happening, but the very thought is almost paralyzing.
Right. And I really validate that. And I recommend that people really work through that, because without working through that, they're not going to be able to move forward. Here's another paralyzing thought. While we're on the topic, I might as well just throw a few other paralyzing thoughts at you. Being alone forever. Alone, right? Yontif, Shabbos, right? Your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s. That could also be a paralyzing thought. So as much as it could be paralyzing to jump in, it could also be paralyzing not to jump in. And so I would really say we need to work through those past experiences, because that's going to be huge. We need to be super cautious about what you're going to want to repeat and what you're not going to want to repeat. Be very careful about who we're dating and who we're vetting in order to make sure that it's safe for us to move forward. But just keep in mind that if you don't move forward, and you don't have to, but if you don't move forward, you might wake up one day feeling just paralyzed in fear. What if I'm alone the rest of my life? But that would be a decision that you made for yourself, not that somebody did to you, right? So the experience of a bad marriage was something that happened that wasn't necessarily in your control. You tried your best, but the decision of not moving forward is a decision that you're making yourself. So the only one who could take responsibility for that is yourself. So you have to weigh which fear you feel is bigger.
Got it. Now, this is, the question was asked very succinctly, but I think it's a broader question. Question was, what if you're on a date and your date asks you about your ex? But I guess the broader question is, like, how and in what way is it appropriate for you to talk about your ex? On the one hand, it's a really important part of your life. It might have been dozens of years. On the other hand, you're trying to move forward. So how do you strike that balance?
Okay, so that's a good question. And it's very important for people to know themselves and to set boundaries in terms of what they're comfortable with. So for instance, if I've gone out with this guy 10, 15 times and I'm comfortable sharing a little bit about who my ex was, because they do deserve to have some sense of what happened there, then you can share that. But if you're feeling pushed past your limits, if it's a first or second date and you don't want to talk about your ex, you can say simple things like, I'd love to get to that sometime. I'm just not feeling like now is the right time. Or, I'm not quite ready to talk about that, but when I am, I'll let you know. Right. So, or you say, yeah, that's a great topic, everything in the right time. So there's no reason why you have to talk about it right now, but you need to set boundaries in terms of what you're comfortable with sharing, because I want to make sure that people don't feel violated. And I don't use that word lightly, because people often feel violated when they're being poked and prodded for information that they're not ready to share. And they feel that if they don't share, then the guy's going to drop them because he wants to know. I can't not answer him. But you cannot answer him. You can answer him nicely, politely, and saying, I definitely want to share that at some point. I'm just not feeling ready to do that right now. When you feel safe, when you feel accepted, when you feel not judged, and you feel like he won't kind of run away and dump you because he finds something out that he didn't know, then you can slowly share different parts of your experiences based on what you feel comfortable sharing. And hopefully he will do the same. You should never be the one to share everything and he shares nothing, right? You take turns sharing back and forth based on your comfort.
Got it. You had mentioned that there's sort of a rule of thumb that a person should wait about a month for each year they were married, or at least there should be this sort of waiting period that might be extended if the relationship had been longer. Question was, what if somebody was in a bad marriage and in their mind they had already checked out of the relationship a while back? Like in their mind they were already, a divorced person, and now they've actually gone through with it, have a divorce, but they sort of feel ready, even though maybe it doesn't seem like all that much time has passed.
So that's a real thing. That is a real thing that happens. And I would say if you would speak to a therapist or a dating coach to make sure that you have healthily and properly mourned what happened in the past, learn from it, and you're really ready to move on. If they agree that you're really ready to move on, then that's not a problem, because some people do accelerate the process because, like I said before, mentally they've already divorced themselves a long time before they'd actually been divorced. Then that could be okay. But I wouldn't make that decision lightly on your own. I would definitely speak to someone to make sure that that decision is sound, because jumping in before you're ready could create some hazardous situations.
Got it. What, especially in our age of increasing polarization, is it okay to have differing political opinions? Ooh, you're about to get canceled.
So here's what I say. It's important that we have an alignment of goals and values, okay? Not because you have to think the same on everything, but because you're going to share a home and a life, and maybe you'll have more children, or even if you don't, you're going to be living under the same roof with this person. Therefore, they're going to be a strong influence on your life. And you would like that the influence that they have is an influence that you want, okay? Political views are really just a symptom of those goals and values. So for the most part, I think most people would agree that if you are talking to somebody who is, a frum person and believes in Torah Sinai, they are probably not going to be pro-abortion, right? So most of the hotbed political topics are going to be things that are really symptoms from our basic goals and values. So I tell people, you don't have to have the exact same political views, but you do have to have goals and values that are within somewhat alignment, within the ballpark. Otherwise, you'll be fighting all day and you won't have respect for each other. So if those political views fall within some ballpark of your goals and values, that's probably, going to work. They don't have to be exactly the same, but they definitely should be within relative alignment.
Got it. Now, this is a bit of a follow-up on one of the previous questions. It's more about practical steps, and that is, a person's been out of the game for a while. Either it was a traumatic relationship, or they've simply been single for a while, and now they'd like to want. There's a story about this guy who's crying at the coastal. He's like, I'm crying because I'm not crying, right? So do you have any practical exercises that a person can take to get themselves into the headspace? They can start, sort of dipping their toe in and warm themselves up to the idea, once again, of relationship, connection, commitment, marriage, and so on.
Okay, so yes, I have two suggestions. One is to start hanging out by families with happy marriages and see what a nice, healthy, happy marriage can look like. Couples that laugh together, that respect each other, that talk nicely to each other, that enjoy each other's company, that are nice to the people around them. Start hanging out with people like that. It's healthy for you to see. The other one is an exercise that I got from a therapist once, who decided that I didn't want to be married. And so she decided she was going to just torture me. And she did this thing, which I guess today we would call lockdown pandemic. Basically I wasn't allowed to talk to any friends, and I wasn't allowed to answer the phone, no computer, no anything. I could have a book, but I just had to sit for an hour in silence by myself in extreme loneliness, right? Just like feel the loneliness. And that might work for some and that might not work for others. But I think that naturally on a Shabbos, if you just take 5 minutes to think about that silence, and if I want that silence to continue for a really long time, that sometimes could be deafening to a lot of people and could motivate people to get up and to really try to create a relationship. And like I said, healthy marriages, happy marriages are very happy. And I think, unfortunately, because happy marriages are happy, like we don't have so much to say, when I was known for sharing all my crazy dating stories. And so people would say, why do you have so many crazy dating stories? And I would say, okay, here's one that's not crazy. I went out with a guy. He was great. We had a great time. I married him. That's boring. I have nothing to say, right? But if I tell you that he did this crazy thing and he said that crazy thing, it's entertaining. That's just how it is. So bad marriages get like a lot of attention. They make a lot of noise and we hear a lot about them. But what we don't hear about very often is the beautiful, happy, wholesome marriages, wholesome families that live right here in our community. So many wonderful people. Start meeting them, start hanging out with them, start observing them from afar if you need to. Learn what they're doing, right? Learn about what their personality is that seems to have attracted such a wonderful person. And I think that that's a healthy exercise to get into.
Got it. I just want to mention, because you are a coach and you just mentioned a therapist, so I want to go back for a moment, revisit the question of coach and therapist. And Laura DM'd me with this amazing definition, really simple paradigm, as she always does. She's great at breaking things down. She said, therapy is why, coaching is how. Ah,
excellent. Love it.
I asked if you could rip it off, and she said totally. So feel free to run with that. Okay. You had talked before about two sort of opposing realities or experiences that people have after having been married previously, and both of them exhibit themselves in a fairly strong way, as you described it. One is that a person either is looking for perfection, like extreme, or they're desperate and they'll take whatever, right? So now, obviously, those are, extreme ends of the spectrum. But then there's sort of the blob in middle. And how do you navigate your way? When do you know whether you're being unreasonable, and when can the thought be reasonable? So, if it's, let's say, for example, taking on difficult children, right? So you might say, well, you should go with this, that this is a good person, but the children are really difficult. Or maybe there's an age differential, or there are so many different variables. The extremes, we can rule out. But how do you know that you're, open enough, but also not too easy? Is that question clear?
Got it. I got it. So I would say that's why we have our list of our needs, right? Because as much as people might say, well, having a list of needs is very selfish. If you're not selfish right now, then you're not going to be able to make sure that those needs are being met, which means you're not going to be an ultimate giver in a relationship because I'm feeling depleted or I'm feeling used, right? So having that list of needs is really very important. You also need a coach, right? Or somebody to help you with that, because I talk to a lot of intelligent people. Having a coach is not about not being intelligent and not being able to figure this on your own. It's just that because you're in it, it's hard to see, right? So if you have a trigger because your ex was older and he was miserable to you, just because the guy is the same age as him doesn't mean that he is your ex, right? So being able to be careful not to toss out triggers that are really not real reasons to say no, but in your mind that they're a trigger, so I would stay away from them. So that would be, that would be one, important point. I would also say that there's a worth it factor, right? And so we're all going to take on, when we marry somebody, we take on something, right? Everyone comes as a package, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? We all take the whole package. And ultimately, when we embrace our package, we say, like, I wouldn't want anyone else's package. This is my package. I don't know how she handled divorce. I only handled, widow, whatever. Everyone has their package that they become familiar with, right? And so being able to have that worth it factor allows me to say, yes, I'm taking a package and maybe the kids are really different, but I'm also getting X, Y, Z, A, B, C. You need to be able to say, but he's worth it, right? I didn't say he's perfect. I didn't say there's not going to be work involved. I didn't say the kids might not be difficult, but there's something about him that is worth it. And for you to know that he's worth it will carry you through a lot, right? And those kids will grow up and those kids will get mature and those kids will leave the house. And at the end of the day, you will be left with a great guy who was worth it. So keep that in mind when you're making that decision. It might be a couple of years of challenging parenting, but it could also be, very worthwhile in the long run.
Got it. Now, there's a question about matchmakers. How much is a reasonable period of time in which you can expect a matchmaker to get back to you? And if they sort of go beyond what is reasonable, what do? You don't want to be annoying, but at the same time, like, you really want to know.
Yes. So there's two different kinds of getting back to you. If you met somebody and they said, oh, I'll try to think of you, that's not really like they committed to get back to you. Okay. But if someone says, oh, I thought of this really great guy, I'm going to ask Josh and see if he's available, and they never got back to you, you might want to send them a text message, a week later. By any chance, did Josh get back to you? Just curious, right? That's very fair. And I do believe that Shadchanim could get a lot better with responsiveness. And I'm a big fan of like just setting alarms in your phone for everything that you need and just tag it, like call this person back about that date or whatever it is, because it is very important. And to the Shadchan, it might not be so important, but the way I experienced it when I was single was like waiting for a very big test result from a doctor, right? Like someone goes for a really big test and they're like, well, oh my gosh, do I have chas v'shalom some horrible, and you're like waiting, and nobody calls you back and you're just panicking more and more, right? So it really is, responsiveness is really important, and Shadchanim definitely do need to work on getting better at that. But again, if someone says, if I think of someone, I'll give you a call, that doesn't mean that they promise to give you a call. That means if they think of someone, they'll call you. Now, you might want to send them a monthly, like, have a beautiful Rosh Chodesh, have a great Sukkot, have a great Yontif, just to remind them that you exist. Definitely, you should try that. But, to badger them every day, not a good idea. And just think about whether or not they actually committed to call you back.
So what do you do if a shadchan just goes dark on you? Like the question was asked, send a couple of emails, Crickets, no response.
Move on, find a new shadchan. Lots of them out there.
Okay.
And even a shadchan is a match. It's got to be the right match. So if they're not getting you, if they're not appreciating what you have to offer, or maybe they just don't have ideas for you, move on, find a different one. Don't sit on it.
I was about to do the Donald Trump, you're fired, but because we talked about political polarization, I'm not gonna. So fire your shadchan, decide how to do it yourself. You can choose whether you want to do it like former presidents may or may not have done it. Okay, moving on. The question was, you mentioned new dating trends, right? Which of these are most helpful, and would you suggest that we prioritize, that we try to get the cliff notes on and study up and dive into? Because there's probably a lot of stuff. Who knows? There might be dating on TikTok or something that's probably not something that you would recommend. So what do you think are some of those trends that are going to be most helpful for people at sort of this age and stage?
Okay, so the most helpful trends are to start with the ones that speak to you. I really believe that. Because they're all going to be new and they might only be a little scary. So if you feel like, oh, you know what, Zoom, it's not like a whole app I have to learn. It's not like a whole website I have to figure out. I don't really like singles events, but I can speak to one person on a screen that I could do it. I know how to Zoom from work, so I can figure that out. If that works for you, that's fine, but pick something. It can't be nothing. It doesn't have to be everything, but it should be something. So there are all kinds of new dating websites out there. Some of them have a shadchan involved. Some of them don't have a shadchan involved. We have this most amazing, wonderful organization, Shidduch Spot, that is here to try to help you, right? There's Zoom dating, there's speed dating, there's Shabbos meals, there's singles events. There's so many things going on that there's a little bit of something for everybody. I don't care if you don't pick everything. I do care if you pick nothing. We have to have something to be able to get you out there. One of the big problems with second-time marriages is that people don't know that you exist, right? If you go out and you cover your hair, people think you're married. They maybe have not heard that, maybe they don't know you well enough to, when they see you in the grocery store, they don't know that you got divorced and you're home with your kids, you go to work and people don't invite you, you make your own Shabbos at home. Nobody knows that you're actually looking. And so how are they supposed to help you? So part of these different opportunities is to get you out there to meet people. There's all kinds of Zoom singles events, Zoom speeding dating events where you can break off into different breakout rooms and you can meet different people. There's so many new things out there that, you could be meeting people from all over the world. In a great sense, this is probably the greatest age of dating opportunity because you could literally date anybody in the entire world within 30 seconds of logging on, right? And that's an opportunity we've never had before. So I say take advantage.
Okay, going back to the shadchan, somebody asked, can you work with more than one shadchan? Or I guess the question would be, how do you effectively work with more than one shadchan? Right?
Okay,
is
so,
there like, so yeah.
Shadchan, multiples.
Shadchan
You could work with more than one. I say, whoever is bringing you someone to go out with should take priority because typically what happens is someone has an idea, the other ones haven't gotten back to you. So, first come, first serve, if that's how you would like to do it. I don't see a problem with working with multiple ones. You also have to find the one that understands you, that gets what you're looking for. It really is like a shidduch. Finding a shadchan is really like a shidduch. There's certain people that their chemistry just doesn't jive. And so they don't really understand what you're looking for. And you're trying to explain it and they keep setting you up with the wrong guys. Stop banging your head against the wall. Just find a different shadchan.
Got it. Okay, we're gonna have to wrap up soon. So I'm just gonna throw in a couple more questions.
Okay.
And then, we'll have to continue offline. Dategreat.com, Rachel at dategreat.com. That is D8GR8.com. Always available, and you can tell what a great resource she is. The question goes to dates that are unreasonable, right? If you're dating somebody and they're just expecting something that's unreasonable, whether it's money or age or height, or how do you sort of make sense of that? Like this person is there, they're in your life, you could theoretically date them, but they just got this, bug in their head. Should you continue to pursue it? Should you ask a shadchan to help you work that through, help them work that through, or should you just walk away, fire them?
So there is a period of time where you want to see if maybe the person can move forward or move past it, or get to know you for who you are and appreciate the other qualities that you bring. But at the end of the day, if it goes on for an extended period of time, everyone deserves to feel appreciated and wanted and loved for who they are. And if that other person can't actually see you for who you are and is only judging you based on one big factor that they can't seem to get over, that's going to be very difficult in terms of feeling accepted and loved by that person if they really can't get over that piece. Right. So there, like I said, there's that period where they can struggle with it because it's new, because it's different, it's unexpected. But, after a bit of time, and that time period will be different for every person, after a bit of time, you'd expect for them to see you as a total person and not just the guy who doesn't have the big bank account, right? You'd like them to see you for who you are. And if they can't, then that's a bigger problem. And that would be an indication to move on.
Okay, final question for tonight. This is really a lead gen question, right? I guess I'm just thinking from a business perspective. Where do you find shadchanim? And let me add on to that. Maybe that's not the best way. Maybe that's not the best channel to find dates. So what would you say should be the channels that you really master to get your best chances of generating dating opportunities?
Okay, so the best channels are the ones that work. Okay, like I asked a friend of mine, which country do you like dating better in, America or Israel? She said, the one that has my husband, right? So it doesn't really matter as long as it's working for you. So if you found this website or this app that's giving you a steady stream of really good quality dates, go with that. If it's not working for you, well, then you need to shift. We have Shidduch here, which is an amazing resource. Okay, there are so many websites online, whether or not it's JWed, whether or not it's Soyuet Sine, whether or not there's so many YU Connects. There's so many From Divorce is a specific website just only for, they have do singles events just for divorcees. So, there's so many opportunities out there. You have to find the one that works for you, and no two people are alike. Isn't going to be one flavor that meets everybody's needs. There might be a community, singles event. There might be, I know we have a Meet the Shadchan event coming up in February, correct, Miriam? There's a Meet the Shadchan event coming up in February. Okay, so, avail yourself of those opportunities. There might be a Shabbos meal where you just meet somebody that you didn't expect. Chai Chin and her husband are doing this amazing chesed. I don't know if Miriam, you know about this, but Chai Chin and her husband are doing this amazing chesed where they're basically, Shomri is giving them their haul and they're doing these routine Friday night meals for singles only. It's actually not focused on dating. It's really just focused on helping people who are single and want a meal. Maybe they're divorced, maybe they're widowed. Just to have a Shabbos meal. Go meet some people, have a good time. You never know who you'll meet, right? So it can pop up in all kinds of ways. And I just want to mention something about that is very true. Somehow society does have very stronger judgment on divorcees than on widows and widowers. And it's not fair because it seems like when someone loses a spouse, that was kind of Hashem did that to you, right? And when someone doesn't succeed in a relationship, that's kind of like I did that to myself. And obviously that's a major oversimplification and really unfair to the person going through it. And those singles really do feel that very strongly, and it isn't fair. And I would recommend that you spend time with like-minded people who appreciate what you've gone through and who've struggled and who are going through painful times. Because those are the people that are really going to be your friends. You deserve to have friends, even if you're not in a relationship. You can be in other kinds of relationships and develop friends and support systems that are there for you during challenging times. So there are so many opportunities to get involved. You got to find the one that's right for you. And I hope that this was one avenue to, help everybody move forward their second time around. And just want to thank Miriam again for hosting this wonderful series, and Laura for your beautiful Dvar Torah, and my husband, of course, for mediating. And thank you for joining us tonight.